Hey guys, welcome back. In last lecture I have talked about the scope. In this lecture I will continue with more examples of scoping, and also I will explain you differences between var, const and let. So let's start with this. Okay, so let's open your coding editors and let's talk about differences between const, or I should order it like this. So differences between var, let and a const. Okay, so the var is just an older syntax how to define a variable. It's not very used nowadays. You are just using let and a const, but anyway, I will show you these differences. Okay, so let's start with the scope. In the case of a var, what is a scope? In the case of a var, is a function scope. Okay, so your scope is your entire function. In the case of a let, the scope is a little bit different. It's something called block scope. Okay, and the const is the same, is block scope. Okay, so what I mean by function scope and a block scope. Function scope you saw in the last lecture, so this is the entire scope of your function. But there are also blocks. When you write, for example, loops or if statements or just empty block, everything is creating a different scope. All right, so for now, let's remove this hello function here. We don't need it here, and also we are executing this hello here, so I will remove this. Okay, so let's imagine in a run up function, we will have some if statement. For now, we don't need to really worry about this code. We will be talking about the if statements later. So I will write here a very simple if statement. And I will write here if true, then execute me this block of code here. And I will define here var variable. And let's say this will be my f scope. I will call it function scope. And this will be function scope like this. And here I will create a let, and this will be block scope, so b scope, and this will be block scope. And I'm again using here double quotes, which is not very good. We should stay consistent, and we choose to use single quotes here. All right, so I have a f scope of a var and a let scope of a b scope. Okay, as I told you, var is the entire function scope. So when I define here var of a f scope, I can access this in my entire run up function and also in my say hello function. So I can get here console log. All right, and this will be my f scope. All right, and then I can access my f scope in my say hello, since this is a function scope, right? So when I will execute this, make sure you have a breakpoint on the run up. All right, let's execute run up, and then let's go on one line after another. Okay, so here we have an if statement. Since this if statement is taking look of this on this condition, which is a true t value, this means we can execute this block of scope. If this value would be false, this wouldn't be executed, but about if statements later. All right, so we are assigning to f scope function scope and to a b scope block scope. Okay, everything is fine. I'm assigning these variables. Perfect. I'm jumping outside of this. But here I am executing my console log f scope. Everything is fine. I can display console log f scope. Then I'm going to say hello first name, and I can again accessing here f scope. Everything is fine. I can access it because it's my still function scope. Different thing would happen if I would be using here b scope. Let's use here b scope, and here also let's use here b scope. Let's execute it one more time. And here it is, and let's go one more time here if true. All right, now we are trying to execute here console log of a b scope. You can see now we are getting here error, reference error, b scope is not defined. All right, so this is basically difference between var, const, and a let. This main difference: var is a function scope, let is a block scope, and a const is a block scope as well. So block scope is this. You can see here we have also for loops. There is a different scope. While loops, this different scope, block scope, and also just an empty scope like this. If I would write also this, the same thing would happen is creating different scope here when I will wrap it in a curly brackets like this. So when I will execute it, the same thing happen here. Okay, and actually I need to write here a breakpoint here, execute this, and the same thing should exactly happen here. So I'm getting here error in a case of a let, because let is just a block scope, it's not an entire function scope. All right, so this is the basically difference between var, const, and let. So one more time, var is entire function scope. It doesn't matter if we are writing here different smaller block scopes, as for if statements or empty curly brackets, which is creating a block scope. Let is different. Let is a block scope, so here is one block of our function. Here is a second block of this empty block here we defined, and here is another block for a function, say hello, right? So I mean, I think this is now pretty obvious, and I will just remove this console log because it's throwing errors. And also I will remove, and we are defining here a bscope. Perfect. Okay, and maybe we can just console log here our fscope, so you can see that we can have access to fscope. All right, so this is one of the differences, and then let's talk about the other difference here. When I am executing a run up function, okay, let's call this, so we will get instead of a run up. As soon as I will get to a run up, so I will click here this down arrow, and I will get instead of my run up. You can see here in my local scope, which is a run up function, I have here declared variables first name 2, last name 2, also fscope here is here over, and say hello. These variables are created even though I didn't assign any values to them, and they are undefined. There is something called creation phase. Even before our code is executed, JavaScript, I'll be talking about this in much more detail later, is executing something called creation phase. So when your function is called, your JavaScript, let's say, interpreter is taking a look on your code before, and it's creating these variables even before you are assigning values to them. That's why we have here in my local scope, I have here first name 2, last name 2, with the values of undefined. As soon as I will get to the line, I'm getting here my Philip. You can see my first name is Philip. So this is called creation phase, or you can call it also, this phenomenon is called hoisting. Okay, hoisting, it's called hoisting, like this, hoisting. Okay, so you can see all of your variables, so in the functions defined in your current scope here are already declared here. All right, so this is a hoisting, and there is also difference between var, let, and a const, how they are behaving together with the hoisting. Okay, so let's cancel this here, all right, and let's specify here more definitions for our var, let, and a const. Okay, in a case of a var, when I will try to console log, or I would like to try to access my variable before it was declared, I will get here a different error. This error will be undefined. Undefined in a case I am accessing variable before declaration. Okay, in a case of let and a const, it will be different. You will get here, I will copy this message here. All right, and I will write here, this will be not undefined, but you will get the reference error. In a case I am accessing variable before declaration, and the same will happen for our const. All right, and also when we are here, I will get here another difference between const and the other two variables declarations. And this, in a case of a const, you can assign value only once. So can assign value only once, but I already show it to you only once. All right, so let's see this reference error here. So in a case, I will define this, let's say, first name and last name as a vars. All right, and I would like to try to console log out here my first name even before I declare this variable. I can do it. and this value will be undefined. Okay, so when I will launch it, all right, I will get to a run app. I will get to my first name. So I'm trying to console log here first name is undefined. I can do it. I'm not getting any errors. I'm just simply consoling log out undefined value, which I can see also here. In a case of a const and a let, this is slightly different. So when I will try to access my first name to which is a const, this will behave differently. Okay, so let's do a same example. Let's go inside of our code. Let's go into function. Let's step on this line. And you can see here now we are getting here reference error, cannot access first name to before initialization. The same thing would happen if I would write here let. Okay, so let first name to, let's do the same thing, let's run our program, let's go into run app, so let's step inside of this function, let's try to console log out here, so step over, and you can see here again, we are getting here reference error. Okay, so same error can access first name to before initialization, and you can see here that's why we are using also only const and let, because they are all enforcing just the good programming practices. Because with the var we have a whole entire function scope, which is in some cases can be good, but entirely we would like to be scoping also by our blocks, not only our functions. Okay, that's one thing. And also undefined in a case we are accessing variable before declaration, you will avoid a lot of errors when you will not rely on this functionality, that you will know that your function is declared way before, but with the undefined value, you would rather get an error when you are accessing your variable before you are declaring it. So let and a const enforcing best practices, plus in a const you can assign only value once. You know that in a const you are always keeping constant values you don't want to change through the run of your program. Okay, so these are basic differences. One more time, var let const hoisting is just a thing when you run your function is called, your variables and functions are declared by before with the undefined values. Okay, so that's the hoisting and our variables, and I think that should be it from this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll continue. I think we'll do small changes in our application. We'll start working with the cars, and I would like to talk about very important concept of objects. And after objects, we'll take a look on if statements, conditional operators, and so on. So guys, that should be it for this lecture, and I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers, guys.